Ethan Carter glanced out the viewport as the shuttle approached the interstellar medical station, Harmonia. The vastness of space, speckled with distant stars, always brought him a sense of awe and calm. Beside him, his colleague, Dr. Marcus Flynn, was busy checking the last of their equipment. "Almost there, Ethan. You ready for your health check?" Marcus asked, looking over with a smile. "Ready as I'll ever be," Ethan replied, patting the case that contained his violin. "I just hope they don't ask me to leave this behind. It's going to be crucial for my study on alien music cultures." Marcus laughed. "I doubt they'd make you leave your violin, but remember it's standard procedure. Everything needs to be declared and examined." The shuttle docked smoothly, and the two men gathered their belongings. As they disembarked, they were greeted by Dr. Adrian Bates, the station's chief medical officer. Bates was a tall, imposing figure with a stern face that softened as he smiled at the newcomers. "Welcome to Harmonia, Dr. Carter, Dr. Flynn. We'll start with your medical examination right away. If you'll follow me." Ethan and Marcus followed Dr. Bates through the pristine, white corridors of the station. The walls were adorned with holographic displays of various celestial phenomena, adding a touch of beauty to the clinical environment. In the examination room, a nurse was preparing the equipment. She turned as they entered, her gaze immediately captivating. Her name tag read Lyriel, and her features were distinctly non-human, translucent skin and large, luminous eyes. "Dr. Carter, Dr. Flynn, I'm Lyriel. I'll be conducting your preliminary checks. Please take a seat here," she said, indicating the examination beds. Marcus went first, hopping onto the bed with a grin. "Nothing like a good health check to start your day, right?" Ethan took a seat beside him, placing his violin case next to him. Lyriel approached, her movements graceful and almost fluid. "What's in the case, Dr. Carter?" she inquired, her tone friendly yet professional. "It's my violin," Ethan explained. "I'm an ethnomusicologist. My work focuses on the musical traditions of various cultures, Earth's and otherwise." "Fascinating," Lyriel replied, her eyes lighting up with genuine interest. "Music is a universal language, they say. I'd love to hear more about your research. Perhaps when the examination is over," Ethan said, smiling. "For now, I suppose we better get on with the health check." Lyriel nodded and proceeded with the examination, expertly maneuvering the medical scanner over Marcus, then Ethan. As she worked, Dr. Bates observed from a corner, occasionally checking the data on his tablet. "So, Dr. Carter, where will your research take you after this?" Bates asked, engaging him in conversation. "I'm headed to the Trilarian sector. Their musical structure is unique, and I've been granted special access to study it firsthand," Ethan explained, his enthusiasm evident. "Ah, the Trilarians. Fascinating people. Their polyphonic scales are unlike anything we've developed on Earth," Bates commented, turning the conversation into a lively discussion on musicology. As the examination concluded, Marcus stretched and yawned. "All done. So, Lyriel, do we get a clean bill of health?" Lyriel checked the readings one last time before nodding. "Everything looks good. I will need to finalize the reports, but you should be clear to go." "Great!" Marcus exclaimed. "Ethan, once you're done here, let's grab some dinner in the station's lounge. I hear the views of the Andromeda Galaxy are unbeatable." Ethan nodded in agreement, his mind already on the sounds of distant worlds. As Lyriel handed him a clearance form, their eyes met again, and he felt a spark of connection. Perhaps, he thought, this mission would offer more than just musical discoveries. After dinner, Ethan and Marcus strolled through the observation deck of Harmonia, the sprawling view of distant stars and galaxies painting a mesmerizing backdrop. Ethan's thoughts, however, kept drifting back to Lyriel, her intense gaze, and the unique curvature of her smile. "So, what do you think of Lyriel? Quite different from what we're used to, huh?" Marcus nudged him, breaking his reverie. Ethan chuckled softly. "Yes, she's captivating. It's fascinating how much her people seem to resonate with music and art." Marcus, who had always been more mechanically inclined, shook his head in amusement. "I'll never understand your obsession with music and culture, Ethan. Give me a good engine to tinker with any day." Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of another human, Dr. John Avery, a linguist whose focus was on communication between species. His presence was always a guarantee of deep, often humorous dialogue. "Ethan, Marcus, fancy seeing you here. Escaping the medbay, are we?" John clapped them on the back as he joined them at the railing. "Just taking the sights, John. How's your project going?" Ethan asked, turning to include John in their vista-gazing. "Slow and steady, my friend. The language barriers between species are profound, but that's what makes it exciting. Speaking of which, I heard you've met our resident Vionian nurse. They say her species has over 1,000 words for music." John's eyes sparkled with intellectual curiosity. "That's right," Ethan replied, his interest piqued. "She seems quite knowledgeable about her culture's artistic expressions. It's a shame she's stationed here. She'd be a fascinating subject for a study." Marcus laughed. "Listen to you two, always on about studies and research. Don't you ever take a break?" "Speaking of which," John interjected, "I'm organizing a little get-together tonight in the communal lounge. A few of us from different departments are sharing stories about our field experiences. Ethan, you should come and bring your violin. It might be a good chance to showcase human culture." Ethan considered it for a moment. That might just be the perfect setting to learn more about the crew here, and maybe play a tune or two. Count me in." As the evening approached, the communal lounge filled with a variety of station personnel, humans and aliens alike. The atmosphere was informal, a blend of laughter and the clinking of glasses. Ethan arrived with his violin, and after some light conversation, John nudged him forward. "All right, everyone, gather around. Dr. Ethan Carter here has agreed to share a piece of Earth culture with us." The crowd quieted as Ethan took out his violin, the wood gleaming under the soft lights. Before he began, he glanced around, meeting the eyes of several aliens, their features distinct and fascinating in their variety. "This piece is called Lark Ascending. It's one of Earth's treasures, meant to evoke the image of a bird in flight, its freedom and beauty. I hope it speaks to you, no matter where you're from." As the first notes soared through the room, a hushed reverence fell over the crowd. The melody was sweet and haunting, filled with longing and the joy of flight. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the music transport him beyond the walls of the station, to open skies and distant horizons. When he finished, the silence lingered for a heartbeat before applause broke out, enthusiastic and genuine. Several aliens came forward, their gestures expressive of their appreciation. Lyriel was among them, her eyes shining. "Your music, it's beautiful, Ethan. It truly speaks across cultures," she said, her voice soft yet filled with emotion. Ethan smiled, handing his violin back to its case. "Thank you, Lyriel. That means a lot coming from someone so attuned to the arts." John, watching the exchange, grinned. "Looks like your music is more powerful than you thought, Ethan. Perhaps this is the start of a beautiful collaboration." Ethan laughed, feeling a warmth spread through him, fueled not just by the music, but by the connections being forged. "Perhaps it is, John. Perhaps it is." Ethan spent the following days immersed in his research, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Lyriel and the resonant connection they seemed to share over music. He decided to visit her at the medical bay during a quiet afternoon. As he entered, Lyriel looked up from her data pad, a smile spreading across her face. "Ethan, what brings you here today? No ailments, I hope?" "Just the need for some insightful company," Ethan replied, setting down his violin case. "I was hoping you might show me some of the musical instruments from Vionia. You've sparked quite an interest in me." Lyriel's eyes lit up. "I'd love to." "Follow me. I keep a few in the cultural archive here." They walked through the sleek corridors of the station, arriving at a room filled with various alien artifacts. Lyriel pointed out several instruments, each more peculiar and fascinating than the last. "This is a choral synth," she explained, handing Ethan a device that looked like a series of transparent tubes. "It synthesizes vocal harmonies based on the user's input." "Try it." Ethan hummed a tune, and the device echoed back with harmonized layers. Amazed, he laughed. "That's incredible. It's like having a choir at your fingertips." Lyriel smiled, pleased. "Exactly. Vionians value harmony in all forms. Now, how about a demonstration of your violin again? I find myself quite enchanted by the sounds of Earth. Eager to share, Ethan opened his case and began to play a soft melody. As the music filled the room, another figure approached the doorway. Dr. Avery, hearing the violin, stepped inside, his curiosity piqued. "Ah, making music, are we?" John said with a grin. "Don't let me interrupt. It's soothing, really." Ethan finished the piece and greeted John warmly. "Actually, you're just in time. Lyriel was showing me some Vionian instruments. Ever seen a choral synth?" John's interest was evident as he took the instrument from Lyriel. "Fascinating. The potential for cross-cultural communication through music is boundless. Lyriel, perhaps you could demonstrate some traditional Vionian music." With a nod, Lyriel picked up another instrument, this one resembling a series of crystalline rods. As she played, the air vibrated with a deep, pulsing rhythm that seemed to resonate in the very bones of the listeners. Music is more than sound to us. It's a bridge between the soul and the external world, Lyriel explained, her eyes reflecting the passion in her voice. John, always the linguist, was quick to draw parallels. "It's much like language in that way, isn't it? Both music and speech are about connections, about understanding." "Yes, and imagine the miscommunications we can avoid by learning from each other's art," Ethan added, feeling a rush of excitement at the collaborative potential. The trio spent the afternoon exchanging knowledge and ideas, each demonstration leading to deeper discussions about culture and communication. As they wrapped up, John suggested, "Why don't we organize a small conference here on the station? A sort of symposium where we could present our findings and experiences with music and language as tools for interspecies understanding." Lyriel was enthusiastic. "I can contribute data on Vionian emotional responses to different musical scales. It would be fascinating to see how humans react as well. And I'll compile a comparative analysis of Earth's and Vionia's musical structures." Ethan chimed in, inspired by the collaborative spirit. As they parted ways, Ethan felt a renewed vigor for his project. The day had not only brought him closer to understanding Vionian culture, but also redefined his mission's scope. To not just study, but to actively engage in the creation of a new, shared understanding across cultures. Walking back to his quarters, violin in hand, Ethan realized that every note he played on his instrument wasn't just music. It was a call to connect, a dialogue extending beyond words, reaching out into the vast universe. Ethan, John, and Lyriel spent the following days preparing for the symposium. The station's communal hall was chosen as the venue, a place where crew and visitors from various cultures congregated. Ethan was tuning his violin when Marcus and Dr. Bates joined him backstage. The air was thick with anticipation. "Need a hand with anything?" Marcus offered, looking over the setup of chairs and technical equipment. "Just make sure the audio feeds are clear. We need everyone to experience this without glitches," Ethan replied, his focus on the acoustics. Dr. Bates, who had been supportive of the symposium from the beginning, added, "This could be a groundbreaking event, Ethan. Music and language as dual mediums for cross-species communication. It's brilliant." "Thanks, Adrian. I hope it resonates with everyone as much as it does with us," Ethan said, giving his violin one final tune. The hall began to fill, a mix of humans and aliens, each bringing a palpable sense of curiosity. John took to the podium first, laying out the premise of their symposium. "Ladies and gentlemen, and beings of all origins," John began, his voice steady and clear. "Today, we embark on a journey of discovery, a symposium where music and language intersect, exploring how these universal languages can foster deeper understanding among diverse species." As John introduced Lyriel, she approached with her crystalline rods instrument, her demeanor calm yet radiant. "Thank you, Dr. Avery. To begin, I'd like to demonstrate how Vionian music can evoke emotional responses that transcend our verbal language." Lyriel's performance was mesmerizing. The tones produced by the rods were not just heard but felt, vibrating gently through the room. When she finished, the applause was enthusiastic. Ethan then stepped up with his violin, his presence confident. "I'll now play a piece inspired by my recent studies, a composition that I hope captures the essence of our shared experiences," Ethan announced. The melody he played was intricate, weaving the human and Vionian scales into a harmonious blend. After the performances, Marcus initiated the panel discussion. What we've experienced today is an auditory feast, a blending of worlds. But let's delve deeper. How can we leverage this in practical applications? Dr. Bates, perhaps you could share your thoughts on the medical implications? Dr. Bates stood, his voice thoughtful. Certainly, Marcus. The therapeutic potentials of music are well documented in human cultures. Considering what we've learned about Vionian responses today, we could explore sensory therapies that utilize these cross-cultural musical elements, potentially aiding in both physical and psychological healing. The discussion opened up to the floor, where various participants shared insights and posed questions. An alien scientist from Zentari spoke about the mathematical underpinnings of music and its potential to aid in complex interstellar navigation systems. As the symposium drew to a close, John summarized the day's outcomes. What began as a simple exploration of music and language has blossomed into a multifaceted dialogue. We are on the brink of new methodologies for interaction, not just between humans and Vionians, but across all sentient species. Ethan felt a deep sense of accomplishment as he conversed with attendees afterwards. The connections being formed were not merely academic. They were deeply personal, bridging worlds through the universal appeal of music. As the crowd thinned, Lyriel joined Ethan, her expression reflective. Today was enlightening, Ethan. I feel we've started something that could change how all species interact. Ethan nodded, his eyes bright with optimism. We've created a symphony of ideas, Lyriel. Let's see where the music takes us next. With the successful symposium behind them, the trio, Ethan, John, and Lyriel, agreed to continue their collaboration, hopeful about the harmonies and discoveries that lay ahead in their Interstellar Symposium series. In the weeks that followed the symposium, Ethan, John, and Marcus, alongside Lyriel, worked tirelessly to deepen the integration of their research. Inspired by the success of their initial event, they planned a series of workshops titled Harmony and Diversity, aimed at both the Harmonia Station crew and visiting delegates from various planets. One morning, as they prepared for the first workshop in the series, Marcus looked over the setup in the main hall, where various musical instruments from different worlds had been displayed. "Do you think we've got enough here to catch their interest?" he asked, arranging the last of the Vionian choral synths. Ethan, tuning his violin, nodded. "It's not just about quantity, Marcus. Each piece here tells a story, bridges a gap. It's about the connection they create." John, checking the audio equipment, added, "And that's what today is all about, exploring those stories, understanding the connections. We're facilitators of a cultural dialogue." Dr. Bates joined them, his face showing a mix of excitement and curiosity. "I brought along some recordings from my last medical mission. The therapeutic sessions using mixed-species music yielded fascinating results. I thought it might be interesting to share." "That sounds perfect, Adrian," John replied. "It's a practical application of what we discussed at the symposium. Real-world examples will definitely enhance our discussions." As participants began to trickle in, a mix of humans and various alien species, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Lyriel greeted each guest personally, her warm demeanor setting a welcoming tone. Ethan opened the workshop with a brief introduction. "Thank you all for joining us today. This workshop is one of a series where we aim to explore the rich diversity of our musical heritages. We believe that through these sounds, we can find common ground and learn from each other." Marcus then led the first session, demonstrating the choral synth. "This instrument," he explained, synthesizes vocal harmonies based on the user's input, reflecting the communal nature of Vionian society. Let's try an interactive experiment. I'll need a volunteer to hum a tune." A Zentari delegate stepped forward, eager to participate. His deep, rumbling voice created a complex pattern that the synth mirrored in a harmony that filled the room with a resonant, multi-layered sound. The workshop participants responded with applause, visibly moved by the demonstration. "Incredible," one of the human delegates remarked. "It's like hearing a whole choir from a single voice." Lyriel took the stage next, introducing the therapeutic aspect. Dr. Bates will now share how these principles apply in a medical context, particularly in therapy sessions across species. Dr. Bates presented his data, showing visualizations of emotional responses to different musical interventions. These sessions help patients from different backgrounds find emotional balance and healing. The potential for cross-species therapy is vast and largely untapped. As the workshop transitioned into a hands-on session, John facilitated discussions among the groups. Think about the music of your own culture. What emotions does it evoke? How do you see it being used in a therapeutic setting? The conversations were animated, with participants eager to share and learn from one another. An attendee from a distant planet described how their culture used low-frequency vibrations in healing ceremonies, a concept that fascinated the human delegates. As the workshop concluded, Ethan and his colleagues gathered to debrief. Today was a success, Ethan observed. Seeing all these different beings connecting over music, it's more than I hoped for when we started this project. Marcus nodded in agreement. It's about more than music, isn't it? It's about healing, sharing, and understanding. We're not just conducting research. We're part of a growing community. John smiled, his eyes reflecting a sense of fulfillment. Let's keep the momentum going. The next workshop could focus on dance and movement. Music is just the beginning. With their plans for future workshops taking shape, the team felt a renewed sense of purpose. Their project was evolving into a dynamic exchange, not just of music and culture, but of hope and healing, weaving a tapestry of unity in the vastness of space. Ethan and Marcus stood in the observation lounge, looking out at the swirling nebula beyond the station. The afterglow of their recent workshop lingered, but the two friends were already brainstorming their next steps. We've done music, but what about movement? Marcus said, leaning against the railing. Dance, rhythm, body language, it's all part of communication. Ethan tilted his head, considering the idea. You might be onto something. Rhythms and movements are universal. Even without words or melodies, they convey emotions and intent. We need to study how different species interpret and express them, though. John joined them, a cup of steaming tea in his hand. I overheard you too. Movement could be a brilliant follow-up to the workshop. But how do we structure it? Alien physiology varies so much. Some species don't even have limbs. Ethan chuckled. Fair point. We can't exactly ask a Zentari to waltz across the room. Can we? No, but Zentari vibrations could serve as their dance, John countered. We frame it around cultural expression. The idea isn't to impose human concepts of rhythm, but to explore how each species embodies it. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. We'd need examples. Maybe a demonstration from different cultures, starting with ours. Ethan, your violin could set a baseline rhythm for everyone to adapt to. Ethan tapped his chin. That could work, but we'd need participants willing to share their own traditions. Lyriel would probably be on board, and she could help us find others. Speaking of which, John said, we need to meet her soon. She's supposed to be in the archive today, right? The trio made their way to the station's cultural archive, where Lyriel was cataloging artifacts. She greeted them with a bright smile. Ethan, Marcus, John, to what do I owe the pleasure? Marcus dove in. We've been thinking about a follow-up to the music workshop, something involving movement and rhythm. Any chance you want to collaborate? Lyriel tilted her head, her translucent skin catching the light. Movement and rhythm? That's an intriguing idea. Vionians have traditional dances that integrate sound and motion. I'd be happy to contribute. Great, Ethan said, his enthusiasm evident. Do you know any others on the station who'd be willing to share their traditions? The more diversity, the better. Lyriel considered for a moment. The Zentari scientist, Kaler, mentioned their ceremonial vibrations during the workshop. He might be interested. And there's Eric from engineering. He's always talking about how his people use synchronized motions and rituals. John scribbled down the names on his tablet. Perfect. We'll gather everyone and arrange a space for the demonstrations. As they finalized plans, Marcus raised a question. What about human traditions? We've got plenty to choose from. But what do we lead with? Ethan grinned. Simple. The waltz. It's elegant, recognizable, and easy to teach. We can use it to set the stage for others to share their own forms of rhythm. Then it's settled, John said. Let's aim for a week from today. That gives us time to prepare. Lyriel looked between them, her gaze lingering on Ethan. This is going to be something special. I can feel it. Ethan smiled back, his voice warm. It already is. Let's make it unforgettable. The group left the archive with a sense of purpose, each member energized by the potential of their next event. As they walked through the corridors, their conversation was filled with ideas and possibilities, the harmony of their collaboration growing with each step. Back in his quarters that evening, Ethan practiced the waltz rhythm on his violin, his mind alive with images of humans and aliens alike moving together, their differences dissolving into the shared language of motion and sound. The thought filled him with anticipation for what was to come. The day of the rhythm and movement workshop had arrived. Ethan, Marcus, and John stood in the station's main event hall, making final preparations. The space was open, with soft lighting and a smooth floor perfect for movement. Several holographic panels displayed visuals of traditional dances from Earth and other planets, setting the tone for the event. "All right," Marcus said, pacing across the room. "We've got the sound system ready, the participants are confirmed, and the space looks great. What's left?" Ethan glanced at his violin, resting safely in its case. "Just getting everyone comfortable. This is new for a lot of them, and some might feel self-conscious." John, always the mediator, added, "That's why we're starting with a simple demonstration. Once they see us making fools of ourselves, they'll relax." Lyriel arrived, her fluid movements as graceful as ever. She carried a small crystalline instrument that emitted rhythmic pulses when played. "Everything looks wonderful," she said, her voice filled with anticipation. "Kaylor and Eric are already on their way." Ethan nodded. "Perfect. Lyriel, you'll lead the Vionian segment after we start with the waltz demonstration. Sound good?" "Absolutely," she replied. "Shall we get started?" The hall began to fill with participants, humans, Vionians, Centauri, and a few other species. There was an air of curiosity and excitement as everyone gathered around the central space. Ethan stepped forward to address the group. "Thank you all for joining us today," he began. "This workshop is about exploring rhythm and movement, not as separate entities, but as a shared expression of culture and connection. We'll start with a demonstration from Earth, a dance called the waltz." Marcus joined Ethan in the center, grinning. "Full disclosure, I'm no dancer, so if I can do this, anyone can." The audience chuckled as Ethan began to play a gentle waltz rhythm on his violin. He and Marcus moved through the basic steps, exaggerating their motions for clarity. The simplicity of the movements, combined with the music, drew smiles from the crowd. John clapped his hands when they finished. "All right, who's next?" "Don't be shy." Kaylor, the Centauri scientist, stepped forward. His deep, resonant voice filled the hall. "On Centauri, rhythm is expressed through vibration. Our ceremonies involve groups, creating harmonized pulses with our bodies." He demonstrated, his chest emitting a low hum that synchronized with the floor's vibrations. Soon, others from his delegation joined in, creating a symphony of waves that could be felt as much as heard. Eric followed, explaining his species' use of synchronized clapping and stomping during communal rituals. The rhythmic patterns were intricate but mesmerizing, and soon, many participants were joining in. When it was Lyriel's turn, she introduced the Vionian approach. "For us, rhythm is fluid like water. Our dances mimic the flow of rivers and the pulse of life." She began to move gracefully, the crystalline instrument in her hands emitting soft, rhythmic pulses. Her movements were hypnotic, and several attendees attempted to follow her lead. Ethan joined in, his violin complementing the crystalline pulses. The sound and motion blended seamlessly, creating a captivating atmosphere. Marcus, never one to sit still, encouraged others to participate. "Come on, everyone. This isn't a performance. It's a party." By the end of the session, the hall was alive with motion and sound. Humans and aliens danced together, their rhythms mingling in ways no one had imagined. Ethan, Marcus, and John watched from the side, their expressions a mix of satisfaction and awe. "We did it," Marcus said, catching his breath. "We got them to connect." Ethan smiled, his gaze sweeping over the vibrant scene. "This is what it's all about. finding common ground, even when we're worlds apart. John raised a hand. Here's to many more workshops like this. I think we're just getting started. The rhythm workshop had been a resounding success, leaving participants with a newfound sense of connection. Ethan, Marcus, and John gathered the next morning in the observation lounge to reflect and plan their next steps. The vast expanse of space outside served as the backdrop to their animated discussion. So, what's the verdict, gentlemen? Marcus asked, pouring coffee for the group. Did we just stumble onto the future of interspecies diplomacy, or was that just a really good dance party? Ethan chuckled, leaning back in his chair. A bit of both, I think. What struck me the most was how naturally everyone engaged. It wasn't forced. It was genuine. John nodded, his tone thoughtful. It proves something we've theorized for a while. Shared experiences, especially through movement and music, transcend the barriers of language and biology. But now we have to ask, what's next? Marcus sipped his coffee, considering. We've tackled sound and rhythm. Maybe it's time to explore storytelling. Every culture has its myths, its heroes. Imagine weaving those narratives together. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting a sort of interstellar storytelling event? That's ambitious, Marcus. Why not? Marcus replied, gesturing for emphasis. We've already laid the groundwork. This station is full of beings with stories to tell. We could combine it with music and rhythm, make it an immersive experience. Lyriel entered the lounge at that moment, carrying a tablet. Good morning, everyone. Am I interrupting? Not at all, Ethan said, gesturing for her to join them. Marcus just had a wild idea about storytelling. Lyriel sat down, intrigued. Storytelling? That sounds wonderful. On Vionia, stories are often accompanied by music and light displays. We believe stories are the essence of who we are. John leaned forward. Exactly. We could use that concept here. Blend traditional storytelling with elements of performance. Each species could present something unique to their culture. Ethan smiled. It's an ambitious project, but if we could pull it off, it would be incredible. Lyriel, would you be willing to help us organize it? Of course, Lyriel replied warmly. I could reach out to the cultural representatives on the station. Many of them would be eager to participate. Marcus clapped his hands together. Then it's settled. We'll start small, keep it manageable. A few stories, some music, and maybe even visual elements. John added, we'll need to write up a proposal for the station's administration, but I don't see why they'd say no. They've been supportive so far. As they began brainstorming logistics, the excitement in the room was palpable. They discussed potential venues, technological needs, and ways to ensure accessibility for all species. Lyriel made notes on her tablet, occasionally offering insights from her own cultural perspective. Ethan glanced around the table, feeling a surge of pride. This was what he'd always hoped for when he first embarked on his interstellar journey. Not just studying other cultures, but collaborating with them, creating something entirely new together. As their meeting concluded, Marcus leaned back, his grin wide. All right, team, let's make this happen. And when it's over, I expect us all to take a well-deserved break. Maybe somewhere with an actual atmosphere and good food. Lyriel laughed. I'll hold you to that, Marcus. Ethan stood, his violin case in hand. We got a lot of work ahead, but I think we're on to something special. Let's get to it. With their plans set in motion, the group dispersed, each member inspired by the possibilities of what lay ahead. Together, they had built a foundation of collaboration that promised to enrich not just their lives, but the lives of everyone on the station, and perhaps even beyond.